So thank you everyone for joining us today. If you do not know who I am, if this is your first time, my name is Courtney Romaine. I am the Senior Associate Director of Research Integrity, overseeing the Institutional Review Board, Human Research Protection Program, and Responsible Conduct of Research. So we are going to discuss authorship practices. I am going to ask everyone to please mute their mics because we are recording this and we don't want a lot of background noise.
Sorry, Courtney, I muted you.
Danny, how dare you? I was going to say, I'll ask Danny to do it for you. Does not discriminate. She is even, even muting me. We are going to go ahead and dive in. So there's going to be a little bit of a presentation, and then I am going to share with you our new authorship policy, some authorship guidance documents, and our authorship web page. So let's go ahead and get started here. All right, authorship and publication practices. And again, as always, please do not hesitate to ask questions during the presentation. If you have a question, you can put it in chat or raise your hand, and my beautiful assistant, Danny, will help, even though I told her I didn't need any help. Turns out I do. So we are going to discuss authorship and publication. I just thought that this picture was kind of funny for any of us who have ever submitted a publication and get our reviewer comments back, especially reviewer number 2. We have all felt this way at some point. So we're going to talk about authorship challenges, AI, authorship policy and guidance, and then I'm going to show you the authorship page, what we have, and some resources for you to make your own decisions and determinations. So why are we doing this? And what is this that you're looking at? Back at the beginning of the year, we did a responsible conduct of research needs assessment. And so hopefully some of you responded to this. If you did, thank you. And if you did not, that's totally fine. But these were some of the narrative responses we received from the authorship component of that survey. These were some of the conflicts, challenges, or confusions that people had around authorship. So you'll see some of it is pretty standard stuff, taking credit for others' authorship. Somebody said that this is not something where a lot of training is necessary. What is necessary is communicating expectations with your research partners. I actually think that the latter of that is true. Communication is definitely at the core of effective and productive authorship. One thing that I did think was kind of funny, and I thought about yesterday during a conversation with one of our guests today, is academia needs to overcome this strange infatuation it has with author order. I also agree with that, but of course it is discipline specific. So this was really the catalyst for putting together the authorship policy and the authorship guidance documents. When we get into the policy section, we're again going to dive into it a little bit more, and you'll see that it's more of a framework and something for researchers to have and to follow, rather than what somebody said down here, administrative policies written by administrators. We're not here to tell you exactly what to do. We are here to provide you with the toolkit to make ethical decisions for scientific best practices. So who is an author? Per our new policy, an individual is an author of a scientific or scholarly work if and only if they meet both of the following criteria. They have a substantial contribution to the scientific or scholarly content of the work, contributing substantially either to the conception, design, or scholarship essential for the work, or to the acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of data for the work, and they have participated in the drafting or significant portions of the work are critically reviewed or revise the scientific or scholarly content of the work. So you have to meet both of those criteria. You'll see that this varies a little bit from the ICMJE requirements, which I think a lot of people really kind of default to. If you are not in biomedicine, the ICMJE is the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. And they have 4 criteria that are very similar to what we have in our policy. But again, they differentiate a little bit. So we do not require final approval of the version to be published. And we also do not require an agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work. If your discipline actually defaults to the ICMJE requirements, which are clearly a lot more strict than what we have, please follow those requirements. We always want you to follow requirements of your discipline and the journal. So some of the authorship challenges that we see most often in research integrity is forged authorship, ghost authorship, gift authorship, guest or honorary authorship, and orphan authorship. You can read these for yourself, but these are the ones that when we receive an email or a complaint or expression of concern from a faculty member or a grad student or an associate dean for research, it generally falls into one of these types of authorship challenges. And so mostly what we see here is gift authorship, honorary authorship, or orphan authorship. So those are the 3 that I've seen here. My previous institutions, I have seen guest authorship, or I have also seen ghost authorship, especially because they were very high-level individuals. And so they just automatically went on the paper. But these are the ones that FAU encounters most. And so we're going to do a little challenge here. We're going to have a little case study. So Anna holds a PhD from a prestigious American State University and specializes in the study of pain, its pathways, and pain reduction interventions. Though trained in Taiwan, Anna thinks in English, which is her 3rd language. However, has some difficulty writing in scientific papers in appropriate and nuanced English. So she typically asks colleagues to review and help her edit in her writing. Anna has taken a postdoc fellowship at a famous institution, famous, not infamous, with a strong publish or perish culture. She enjoys giving people ideas and supporting them. In return, she sometimes asks for help with her writing and is happy to acknowledge their assistance in her papers. However, when colleagues have returned her manuscripts with their name included in the list of authors, Anna's a little stunned. It seems they feel entitled to do this. So this is not an uncommon situation. And in fact, this case study came from the Office of Research Integrity, Department of Health and Human Services, and they put this out here because it is a pretty common instance. So what do you think, given what we've said about who is an author and the types of prohibited or unethical practices in authorship, what do you think Anna is experiencing here? Should her colleagues who have reviewed these papers and helped her, with some grammar and English, should they be considered authors? And I will call on people if nobody speaks up.
So I think no, for just grammar and like language editing, I don't think that people should be an author.
Okay.
I think acknowledgement would be good enough. Because
Yeah.
nowadays the journals also offer actually this type of service, probably
Mhm.
against a fee, but yeah, you could, and of course you wouldn't make the language editing person an author.
Right.
Mm.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Merck. You are absolutely correct. So per the policy and the ICMJE requirements, these individuals have not participated in drafting the work or provide significant portions of the work, or critically reviewed or revised the scientific or scholarly content of the work. So they would not meet the criteria for authorship under the policy, or ICMJE requirements.
So Courtney, we did have another one in the chat,
Yes.
said no editors, if anything.
What do you mean no editors, if anything?
That's what the comment
Okay.
says.
No. So if somebody is just providing editing, then they would not be an author. As Dr. Merck had mentioned, that's somebody that could certainly be referenced in an acknowledgement. But in this, using these criteria, then they would not be included as an author because they didn't contribute substantially. Now, if it was somebody that, was drafting a lot of the work and taking Anna's data that she had analyzed and done the interpretation and was maybe writing her method section or her discussion section and really putting in a lot of the significant portions of the work, or revising the scientific or scholarly content of the work, then yes, I would say that they would probably meet that criteria for authorship. Do we have any other questions or comments, Danny?
No.
Okay, all right. Thanks. We will move on then. Another authorship challenge that we have experienced here in research integrity is accusations or concerns about plagiarism. So per our policies, and this 10.1.1 is our research misconduct policy that I'm referencing here. Plagiarism is the appropriation of another person's ideas, processes, results, or words without giving appropriate credit. So research misconduct, which does include plagiarism, does not include honest errors or differences of opinion. And so going back to what I was saying earlier about this podcast that I was listening to, and retractions in journals, there are a lot of retractions for plagiarism. However, plagiarism does fall under research misconduct and one of the elements of research misconduct. However, if it is an honest error, such as self-plagiarism, or maybe you did not cite the source material, I would say that that is not research misconduct and that is an honest error. So just because something gets retracted for plagiarism doesn't always mean that they have lifted complete bodies of work and it is true research misconduct. Plagiarism is very broad. So it doesn't always mean that it's research misconduct. It can be an honest error. Okay. So some of these examples of plagiarism, again, I think some of them are very clear, they're very evident. What I want to focus on at the bottom here is using a large language model to engage in any of the above. So turning in someone else's work, copying largest pieces of text, adding multiple sources together. So taking a section of work and asking the large language model or AI to rewrite or summarize that work of your own is considered plagiarism if you are not citing it. Now, we're going to talk about AI and ethical uses of AI in a little bit, but I just want to be very clear that, AI is here. I am not scared of it. Nobody should be, scared of using ChatGPT to help you with your research. However, there are certain ethical no-nos then with using it and passing it off as your own work. Okay, so plagiarism, like I said, can be a little tricky, especially when it is plagiarism of, one collaborator maybe is accusing another collaborator of plagiarism. These are the sorts of things that research integrity, our Office of Research Integrity, can help tease out and decipher. However, like I said, plagiarism isn't always really clear about what it is. But these are very clear about what you should not do. So if we go back to Anna in the case study, and Anna says that her goal is to be a good scientist and not fight over who gets to be an author of her work. So she has let it go that her colleagues have added their names to her paper. She's just going to let that ride. She feels very blessed with an opportunity to work on some of the most intellectually exciting projects and places in the world. She would never do anything to jeopardize this opportunity. However, Anna really gets upset when her lab boss not only puts his name on her work, but also takes a proposal she has prepared for funding by NIH and sends it off under his name without even discussing it with her. When she mentions it to him, he just looks at her like she's really out of line to even ask this. So, what do you think about this practice, which I think is a very common practice? Again, otherwise it wouldn't be a case study at Office of Research Integrity. Would this be considered plagiarism? Or would this be considered a type of orphan authorship? Or should the lab boss even be considered an author at all? And again, I will call on people if nobody speaks up.
Well, it depends on the policy of the lab. Sometimes the people that run the labs are the last authors on all manuscripts. I mean, it depends. So it's a policy issue for wherever you're at.
Mhm.
So technically, but I mean, what this person did is actually theft. I mean, it's an intellectual theft. I mean, that's yeah. So that there would be other courses I would pursue after that. So, but having the name added to every manuscript is a potential thing in some labs.
You're right. That's a really good point, Dr. Newman. Like, it depends, right? There are some labs that because it is the PI's lab, that they are considered an author on every paper, but that's that lab's culture, and that would be the expectation in that lab, and hopefully something that they would discuss with all the grad students and postdocs and other researchers that are coming in. I think what the key here is without even discussing it with her. So because her lab boss did not discuss it with her and just put his name on that paper or on the proposal, I agree. I do think it is intellectual theft. I think it is plagiarism. And it would also be considered like a honorary authorship. So assigning authorship credit to an individual who does not meet the criteria, but is given credit because they occupy a senior position or provided funding or other resources for the work. So it would be honorary authorship on that proposal that Anna didn't even put on there. Are there any other thoughts about this situation?
So with honorary, they don't. So with honorary, see, when I thought honorary, I thought you were giving it to somebody because of their position. It sounds like Anna didn't even want to do that. That's the only reason I wasn't sure about the honorary.
So honorary authorship can also be, like you said, somebody putting their own name on there. They're the ones that are saying, you must honor me with this
So
authorship.
it doesn't have to be given. It could be taken.
No, it can be taken.
Okay, I got you.
It doesn't have to be bestowed. It can be taken.
I mean, I find with a if it's a publication and the lab manager is basically the last author, something like that, maybe one could argue that he or she provided something like the resources or maybe the general guidance on the project and things like that. Maybe they were talking a lot in between and so on. So I find this is less critical, but the second example of like appearing on a grant proposal without having written anything on it, and basically eliminating the student is like very unethical in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's something that, again, going back to if they had not discussed it beforehand, or if Anna was not aware of the culture of that lab, then that's something, that would be a surprise. And I think it goes back to, and, I think you and I yesterday had kind of talked about this a little bit, Dr. Merck, just the communications, within the disciplines, the differences in disciplines, the differences in, cultures, and the differences in labs, and how a PI runs that lab, or how that senior author or major professor runs that lab. The whole point is that, to just do it is unethical. Unless you have an agreement beforehand, or again, if that postdoc or grad student knows what the expectations are. And I saw, I saw Matthew Patterson also had was
Oh.
going to say something. Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I have laryngitis, so
Yeah.
hopefully you can understand. I think any person who's submitting a grant application to NIH has the responsibility to give a go-ahead to their supervisor to say, I am planning this, and also ask them what role would they, if any, would they like to play in this grant application. I think it's hard for me to understand that a manager or lab, leader does not in some way mentor that person. But I think, I think the perspective should be shifted from this poor woman whose boss is taking what's really hers away from her, to a situation of empowerment for her to say, I am submitting this grant application to NIH. Would you like a role in this?
Yeah, and like you said, again, the communication and the culture and expectation in that lab. And this is a scenario that people have expressed to me in their own work. Doing my own interviews and research in this space, people have said that they were forced to put people, other lab members on their papers, when they had no work, no contribution, anything of the like, because that was the expectation of that lab. Now, this situation is, again, something from Office of Research Integrity, so presumably they put this together, based on their experience, and it is certainly fictional. But it does happen, and it goes back to what is the culture, what are the expectations, and what is the agreement beforehand.
Maybe can I comment on that? So I'm aware of these practices at high profile universities, especially. So very, very common, basically happens all the time, that basically a junior faculty or postdoc has basically to do this. The thing is, yes, it would be nice if the director of the lab is very friendly and mentors a student or a postdoc or so. Unfortunately, it's not really happening. Basically, their goal is they want to be on every single proposal and get all the credit. And the thing is, the postdoc has only one option, basically decide to leave the institution or that lab environment or not. Basically, I work under those circumstances or not. I don't think there's really a good way to go about this otherwise.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because the individual I was speaking about that had experienced this, when I spoke to them, they did end up leaving the high research institution that they were working at, and it was a very prestigious institution, in the top 10 of research funding, in the US, with over $1.2 billion in research expenditures per year. They left that institution because of the situation in their lab.
Actually,
challenges you.
the argument I heard from the director of those labs was often like, we have to put like high-profile people because then the proposal has higher chances of getting funded.
Mhm.
So those kind of things.
But then that's a ghost
Of
authorship.
course, yeah.
That's ghost authorship, which is an unethical practice. So it's happening everywhere. And I think what we as researchers need to be aware of is, making the expectations known from both sides. Again, from a PI, if you have a lab, if you're a grad student coming in, asking what is the expectation for the lab PI? Are you going to be on all papers? What, how is authorship assigned? And we're going to go through this. So I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. I just wanted to lay the groundwork here.
Courtney, we do have another example of unethical behavior in the chat from Beth King, that sending a proposal in that you did not develop.
Yes, very unethical. Don't be that guy. That if you did not develop it and you did not contribute, that could absolutely be plagiarism. And that is also an unethical authorship practice. So let's move on a little bit to going back to talking about LLMs and AI. As I mentioned, I am not opposed to this. I will often even tell my researchers to run their consent forms through ChatGPT to assess for readability and grammar and understanding. I think that it can be a very valuable tool. However, with great power comes great responsibility. So we need to use it ethically and we need to be aware of what we're doing. So the pre-writing usage with LLMs, some really great ways, and I stole this from Dr. Mike Zordos. Hopefully he'll be here later on. But it is brainstorming. You can collate papers with it. So he has here Elicit is an AI that can be used for collating papers, for translating text to speech or podcast form. You can run papers through this and it will actually put it into a podcast, or automate systematic reviews and meta-analysis for data extraction. So where you can run into challenges is asking a question will sometimes lead to the wrong answer. So a lot of us maybe have used AI, we've used ChatGPT and we've asked a question and it hallucinates a response. AI wants us to be happy with it, even though it is a robot. It wants to please us. It wants to say, yes, I have given you the correct answer. What you as the driver of these questions is you really need to be very specific in what you're asking and what you're wanting. The tool, again, can only provide what's written in a paper or what's written online, and it is summarizing that information to provide to you. So for example, if you are using it to extract data or ask for a summary, as Dr. Zordos has written here, it can provide you with incorrect statistical usage. That may not show up if the authors inappropriately interpret their work. It may show up that way. And finally, you have to check everything. So the responsibility is on the researcher to make sure what the LLM is providing to you is accurate. So you can use it as a valuable tool, but again, you are responsible for the overall output and the overall data and information that you're putting into this paper to be an author. Speaking of, LLM can never be an author. AI cannot be an author because it cannot meet the criteria for authorship and it has no moral agency. So some writing usage, so 6 uses from Khalifa and Abadwe. I know I'm going to butcher this, Albadaway. So it can facilitate idea generation and research design, improve your content and structuring. It supports literature review and synthesis. I have used this quite often in my own writing. It's a lot easier than using PubMed. I find PubMed to be so clunky, but instead I just go into ChatGPT and I say, find me papers on responsible conduct of research and organizational culture. I then go in, I look at them, I double check, I go to the paper and I read the paper. I don't just generate a lit review with these articles. A lot of them are hallucinated, they are not accurate, and they don't really, address the concern or the question or the issue that I'm trying to do research on. It can enhance data management and analysis, again, supporting editing, review, and publishing, and finally, assisting communication, outreach, and ethical compliance. So these are, again, some uses that are very helpful with AI, and I do not think that you should never use it, but again, use it wisely, use it ethically. So again, there has been an increased usage, and this is an article that just was published a few days ago, actually, Kusha 2025. And I think it's really, really interesting. So this study analyzed 1,759 papers, and I'm going to read off this because I have it actually written. Indexed in Scopus and Web of Science up to August 2024 that explicitly mention ChatGPT in their acknowledgements. You see, it's in the acknowledgements, not an author. So figure 1 shows that most researchers acknowledge ChatGPT for text editing and proofreading, while a small fraction credit it for non-editorial tasks like coding or data analysis. Further, 3.5% mention its use in drafting manuscripts and 1.6% for creating visual content. So despite the potential of large language models for programming, coding, and debugging, only 2% of these acknowledgements noted for uses in this area. It suggests that ChatGPT was mainly used for improving writing with limited recognition for more complex research contributions. So figure 2, the one on the right, it shows the 15 countries with the most ChatGPT acknowledgements for manuscript editing, with around 75% of corresponding authors from non-English speaking countries. So what this suggests is that LLMs like ChatGPT help researchers improve the clarity and language of their academic writing. By reducing language barriers, the tools can actually make the research more accessible. So again, these are positive uses for LLMs and AIs. So again, with great power comes great responsibility. So what are we asking you to do? We are asking for ethical use of AI and disclosure. This framework that I have presented is actually our guidance document D with our new authorship policy. So we have this as a guidance document already, so you don't have to copy this, you don't have to take a picture of it. It's readily available for you on our webpage. These are when disclosure is mandatory, when it's optional, and when it's unnecessary. So I think this is a really great framework. It was published this year by David Resnick and Mohammed Hosseini. It is used with permission from those authors. And I think it is a great way to start thinking about when you should disclose use of AI. They also have in this framework and in their paper how to disclose this. I also want to make it really clear that while this framework is out there and I have no issue with it, there are a lot of journals that may have issue with it. So you always want to check the journal policies on AI before you submit a manuscript. These are always changing. They are dynamic. On our webpage on authorship, we do have a link to a lot of these journals' AI policies. They may be updated. So check early, check often, but this is just a good tool and framework to have when you're initially developing your manuscripts. Okay. So speaking of, here we go. Does anybody have any questions before I start showing the policy and guidance?
So I used ChatGPT in one of my papers for help with coding and Stata. And I double checked everything and I reran it with the do file over and over again to make sure everything was correct. And then I
Mhm.
also, because Taylor and Francis makes you do an ethical use of AI disclosure. And I put that in there, but I was clear that I only used it for like also for touching up some references and for slight grammar refinement. And
Mhm.
all three of my reviewers came back saying that I should steer clear of AI because I give up ownership of my work. And I
Oh,
had to
yes.
ask ChatGPT what that meant. Um, and Chat and I have a relationship like that. She told me that I don't give up my ownership. And I even have a switch toggled off on ChatGPT that says that I don't use what I put into it for learning. So
Mhm.
my data stays my data, but I don't put data into there. I just put equations in there and references. It's not like I drop my entire paper into ChatGPT and tell it to fix it. But I know when you're dealing with reviewers, basically I just say, thank you so much. I'll think of this in the future. I had no idea or whatever. You have to flatter them like that, but I do think they're wrong. Like I don't think that Chat is storing my data and using it for learning, like what I put in there, if I have that switch toggled off.
Now that I can't speak to, because I have not used it with that toggle. I have not turned off that feature on my own Chat GPT. However, I do see where they're coming from, and I think that it came from a place of, hey, look out, they can steal your data. It certainly didn't sound like a criticism, but you're absolutely right. People do often use these large language models and may not realize that the reason you're getting information back is because they've put information in, and a lot of them do take your information and feed it to others and use it to continually learn and continually improve. That's a good cautionary lesson, and I thank you for telling us that you can turn that off, because I had no idea, actually. Yeah, good information to have. Thank you.
We do have a comment in the
Mhm.
chat from Kevin. It says, from what I have been told, we can use Copilot to ensure data privacy, as FAU has data protection policy with MS Copilot, but not with ChatGPT. And then Sarah also has her hand raised.
Yeah. Great, Sarah.
I was just gonna say the same thing. When I met with the AI department, they did tell me that if we use Copilot with our FAU login, that it is protected. And I didn't know if you had also heard that, Courtney.
I had not heard that, mostly because I find Copilot to be clunky. I don't find it to be helpful at all, so I shun Copilot. But that's just my personal opinion. But I had not heard that, but it's good information to have. Again, and thank you for sharing. So maybe that's something we can link to if they have that information on a web page. So our web page does link to the AI at FAU page, which includes a lot of information on AI. And so maybe that is included on that page as well. All right, so let's go ahead and let me show you what we have. So our new authorship page is under research integrity and responsible conduct of research. Here you will find, excuse me, some information about ethical authorship practice, some of it of which we have covered here today. We do provide you with information on predatory publishing, why it is harmful, and how to identify predatory publishers and how to protect yourself. So we have a few different places like Think, Check, Submit. This is a really good source. I know that Beal's List is no longer being updated. That was really kind of the original predatory publisher database, but since then a lot of them have popped up. So there's an open policy finder, and then of course Retraction Watch, which is fantastic. If you have not been to Retraction Watch or visited Retraction Watch, I highly recommend it. They also have an incredible database of retracted articles and the reason they were retracted. And then finally, Ulrich's Web is also a source on 300,000 periodicals of all different types. Here's more information on the use of AI. Again, we have the framework from David and Mohammed, and it is our guidance D. Here is a list of the publishers. Like I said, the AI policies of different publishers. If there are more out there, please let us know. I got kind of the top ones. I know that there might be some more obscure ones that we haven't included, or ones that I'm just not familiar with. Use of preprints. I did not bring this up in the presentation because I really wanted to drill down on ethical authorship practices, but preprint is great. We love preprint. I love preprint. I think it is a wonderful way to get your work out there. We have done one of these research roundtables on preprint with Dr. Zach Robinson. So you can find it, you can link to it here and watch it. So we have also linked to some preprint platforms. And please, if you have any questions about preprints or want to learn more about it, I would start with the presentation from Dr. Robinson. And I think you can probably even reach out to him. He has been working in the preprint space for quite some time, as well as Dr. Mike Zordos from Exercise Science, and they can kind of shepherd you through the process if you're not familiar. And then finally, we have our policies and guidance and a lot of resources, Here's the AI at FAU, COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics.
Courtney, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
yeah,
Should
go
we
ahead.
be seeing a web page? We're only seeing the
Oh my gosh, are you
PowerPoints.
kidding me? It's not, oh, you're not seeing it?
No,
What the heck?
yes, we're only seeing the PowerPoint slides.
Oh my goodness, I closed those down. What about now, Danny?
Now we can see. Thank you.
Yay! Yay, hooray.
Thank you,
So let me
Jenny
come back
Soberon.
up and show you all the cool stuff that I was just talking about. Thank you for pointing that out. This is why I do need you after all. So again, this is where you find everything. Responsible conduct of research, research integrity. So this is where we have the preprints, the links to the AI policies, our own policies and resources. These are a lot of articles on ethical authorship. We have a link to the FAU libraries. Shout out to our librarians who are doing an amazing job. We had one of our librarians last month talk about data management and data lifecycle. Here's data, or the librarians talking about copyright. You can link to that. One thing I do want to point out is this National Information Standards Organization, the contributor role taxonomy. This is also included in one of our guidance, guidance A, assigning credit for contributions. And Danny, call me out if you don't see this. Hopefully I can you see it? Guidance A? No? Outstanding. It's what I like to hear. All right, let's get it going here. What about now? You good?
Yes.
Fab. So assigning credit for contributions. As I mentioned, not everybody meets the criteria for authorship, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you did nothing. It just means that what you did doesn't meet those criteria. So this is something that you can use. I don't want to tell anybody what to do. I don't want to tell anybody what you should use if this is not a taxonomy that's going to work for your discipline or a taxonomy that's going to work for your lab. It's just a resource. So I think that having contributions in an acknowledgement section is great. You can also identify what each individual that is listed as a substantial contribution can do. So I think that you can have conceptualization, data curation, formal analysis, investigation, methodology. These are all part of contributor roles and how you can identify whether they are substantial or not. Again, this is just something to put in your toolkit. It is not a requirement. It can also help with authorship order and how you want to determine authorship order. In my experience, whenever I have done authorship order, we usually just, I have a team that I have written with, and there's about 3 or 4 of us. One time we'll go alphabetically. One time we'll just say, you know what, you're writing most of it. You go ahead and be first author. So we don't have a lot of conflict. But then again, sometimes you are in a multidisciplinary team, or you're working with somebody for the first time, or you're working with both of the labs are working together. So these are the things that should really be discussed at the onset of that partnership and that collaboration. And then you can also have a substantial contribution. Maybe they don't warrant authorship, but they warrant credit, and you want to give them a little shout out. So if they have funding acquisition, resources, or supervision, these are ways that you can still acknowledge individuals, even again, if they don't warrant authorship. And so I did want to bring up again this idea of having a discussion and an authorship plan. So let me see, and hopefully I can bring this one up as well. Danny, can you see sample C or?
No.
Nope. Great. This is really going well for me today, you guys. I'm so glad we're recording it. Again, this is not what we call an authorship agreement, because an agreement has a very specific legal implication. This is more like an authorship plan. Now, this authorship plan, again, is not a requirement and something to put in your toolkit. That's why we say it's a guidance document and not a policy document. So you can use it or not use it, but I think it's a really good tool to have at the beginning of a collaboration, or if you are coming into a lab, or maybe you're setting up your own lab. This is something that you can use, and it can be a dynamic document. It's certainly iterative. You can have the contributions for each manuscript, or maybe you have a specific way that you want to do this. Totally up to you. What the contributions are, what people did, and how authorship order is determined. Like I said, this is certainly something that is not required, but if you want to use it, it's here and you're welcome to it. All right, so now that I have totally fumbled this sharing, I'm going to turn off my sharing 100%. And we are going to, just talk. If anybody has questions, concerns, about authorship, I see Dr. Zordos has joined us. He actually teaches our Responsible Conduct of Research, Authorship and Publication session. So if you have questions for me or questions for Dr. Zordos, let's talk about authorship.
I'm not sure if anyone had the chance to see, but David Newman did share some instructions on how to turn off data sharing on ChatGPT.
Great.
And then I believe it's Kathy who said she was working with a faculty member on a scoping review. We thought we should consult with a librarian to provide us with lists of articles that came up with our keywords. The librarian indicated they had to be an author, and that was their policy. I don't think this policy is valid here, especially if they are only providing the articles. We did keep the person on as a co-author, but I didn't think it was appropriate. Authorship should be universal at the university.
So our policy is a division of research policy. I am aware that there may be other policies or procedures out there. And again, Kathy, this is something that may be discipline specific, or if the library has a certain way of doing things to where they are contributing and developing the manuscript. And so maybe this is something that, you know, is part of a larger discussion. If it's not something that we would consider to be within the scope of the division of research, then I think people can use their best judgment. We'll just put it that way.
Well, I appreciate you weighing in on this. I had since spoken with a librarian and they had no idea of that policy in library science. So I'm just wondering if you can do an outreach to the various colleges and libraries to offer your authorship policy and see if they have their own.
So the authorship policy has been promulgated by the Associate Deans for Research. We have put it out, I believe we published it in the Beacon as well. We sent out a notice when the policy went live. So we're going to be repeating that in the upcoming Beacon, letting people know that it's out there. It is going to take a while to adopt and for different organizations within FAU to really use it, to, like I said, adopt it and to come around to it. I know
Well-
that College of Science, the ADR in College of Science, Dr. Chudish was very excited and sent it out almost immediately. But there are other ADRs that maybe, you know, just weren't sending it out, or maybe it just hasn't been distributed.
Well, I think, you know, bravo to that effort. I would just suggest also sending it to the head of the library science and any other group. Oh, also there's a group at the university. I haven't contacted them, but I sent other people to them on writing. So I think they have their office in the student union or
Yeah, the writing center.
right, the writing centers. So I would also, you know, would urge you to disseminate this information to them to see whether whether number one, they have policies, and number two, whether their policies, you know, agree or how they differ from this policy.
Yeah, where they're diverging for sure. There is something, and Danny, I caught this one from Matt Patterson in the he says, I've never heard of preprints, so you can post your manuscript before or while it is being reviewed at a journal. Couldn't that interfere with double-blind peer review? And I am going to turn that over to Dr. Zordos, who is our preprint expert. Mike, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I was actually in the middle of writing back to Matthew, so this saves me from that typing. Well, first, excellent question. So preprints are something that's been around for quite a while now, but are just really picking up steam, I'd say, over the past few years. And I'll kind of address this from a broader construct first, and then narrow it down specifically to what a preprint is and where you could find those and how you could go about the process if you chose to do so. And I'd say preprints are part of a larger framework called open science. And so if you're familiar with something called the Open Science Framework, which is just one example, that's a website that you could use to pre-register trials, to upload data and code and share all of your information. It's a process that I am supportive of and our lab has partaken in over the past few years and has continued to do so. And so with any project that you have, you could, let's say, upload all of your code, all of your data, and nobody can take it. But that way somebody could look at it. And the advantage of that is if they could say, hey, did you consider looking at the data this way or so forth? Or if you pre-register a trial and you say, hey, these are the methods that I'm going to use, and these are my hypotheses, and these are the statistical analyses that I'm going to use, then you're really kind of held to that. So if there's discrepancies in what you did versus what you pre-registered, then somebody could say, hey, well, you were going to do this, but you changed course here. Now, you can adjust what you pre-registered with Open Science, right? But you would need to follow those procedures. And so one of the advantages of that, and I promise I'll bring this to preprints in a moment, is your statistical analyses need to fit your hypotheses, right? And so, for example, if you said in a pre-registration that your hypothesis was that there was not going to be a difference between these two groups. This group is going to do intervention A, intervention B, and then you had a pre-test and a post-test, and you said, hey, I'm going to do a 2x2 repeated measures ANOVA. Well, remember, a 2x2 repeated measures ANOVA or an ANOVA doesn't assess if things are similar. It assesses if things are different. So if your hypothesis was that the outcomes between groups would be similar, then you would need to run an equivalence test. And so by putting that up on the Open Science Framework, you could have an astute researcher or even not a researcher, and that's just one example, say, hey, maybe you should consider this approach. And so a preprint is part of the larger Open Science Framework. Now, for a preprint specifically, there are discipline-specific preprints. So let's say for biology, you have bioRxiv. For my field of exercise physiology, you would have sport archive. You have Eng archive for engineering archive, right? These are very broad. There's one for physics and so forth. And so you have some work, and here are the kind of advantages of preprints. You want to be able to disseminate it quickly. If you upload it to a preprint server, anywhere from 24 hours to 1 week, it would be available on that preprint server, right? It would be up and available. Most journals nowadays accept articles submitted that are also up as preprints. So this was a concern maybe 5-10 years ago, but for the most part, journals will now say, yeah, sure, you can upload it as a preprint and you can then submit it to our journal. So it will be up and disseminated quickly. So if somebody is worried about getting scooped, this should help with that in the sense that there is a clear mark, hey, this was done by your lab group here first and so forth. One of the other advantages of preprints is that you can get really, really valuable feedback before you submit it to a journal, right? So no matter how much work you put into that paper and how many years go into it and how much feedback you get from your co-authors and your students and your colleagues and so forth, you may be missing something, and there's nothing wrong with that. So what happens is you'll get feedback, and you'll get feedback not just from experts. You'll get a lot of nonsense feedback from non-experts too. But you would also be surprised by discussion of a paper that is out there, let's say, even on social media, that is up as a preprint. We have actually, we put preprints up for that specific purpose. So we can see the chatter and see what we've missed. And then we actually have a current preprints up that we have 4 versions of. Because we noted that we needed to explain some things better, and that was highly valuable. And then we submitted to a journal and it was accepted, and I was grateful for that. And so, and we'll get out into the hands of people. We have a meta regression up there that achieved over 30,000 reads before it was then ultimately published in a journal, which led to exposure for our group and led to the author getting invited on podcasts to discuss it and so forth, and things like that. So I find them highly valuable in that case to put those preprints up and do that. Now, in terms of it interfering with the peer review process, I think this is a really, really good question, right? And that's something that could come up, which is to say, all right, well, if this is out there and it's supposed to be double-blind peer review, they'd know who you are, right? And so then with double-blind peer review, the kind of overarching theory behind this is that this would be done to everybody's anonymous, so it's done to kind of the strictest scientific integrity where there's no biases that are coming into play and so forth and that sort of thing. And I would say that is possible. That's how that occurs. But I'd argue that although peer review is effective and is very much a net positive, I would argue that peer review itself is quite flawed. Now, I don't have all the answers to how to fix it, but I would say that, especially in some fields, although peer review is, quote, double blind in some journals, but not in all, I would argue that most peer reviewers can narrow down to a few people who's writing that paper anyways. I know in our field, I can do that quite well. And sometimes you can even kind of figure out who the reviewers are. When reviewers are anonymous, I think that that can bias their review, just as knowing who the person is can bias their review. I think when reviews are anonymous, individuals will tend to say things that are a little more outside of their expertise. And in that case, the editor may or may not have time to be able to look and really decipher if what that reviewer is telling them is correct. And that could make its way into peer review and may actually impair the quality of the article that is being submitted, because they'll make a statistical request that is incorrect and outside of their scope of expertise. Whereas if you were dealing with an open peer review or a single blind peer review, depending on which side, the reviewer's name might be known. And then they might not review a paper in which they are not an expert, because they'd say, oh, they're going to know who I am. So for example, when I peer review a paper, even if it's double blind, I make it known who I am. I always put my name in the review. And I sign off on that to say, hey, this is me, this is who I am, and so forth. And that sort of thing. So I think preprints, to bring it back to the original question, can be highly effective. Obviously, I'm a proponent of them. Although I understand, because at first wasn't open to this maybe 10 years ago. And I have to give credit to my students that have come through my lab who are, much younger than I am and in tune to these things, saying, hey, listen, old man, we need to kind of move with the times a bit. And it was reluctant at first, but I'm very grateful for that. So for me, they're discipline specific. You can put a paper up. The advantages are you get it up within 24 hours to a week. You can get some valuable feedback before submitting to a journal. So oftentimes we'll put up a preprint and we will deliberately wait at least a month to see what feedback we get and then adjust the paper and then submit it to a journal. So that's my very, very long-winded answer to what a preprint is. Hopefully that was helpful for you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions that you have? We're at over our time, but I think a lot of that is my fault for wasting everyone's time with not knowing how to share things, because apparently I am an old woman as well. But I appreciate everyone's time and input and really great questions. I think this is a topic that really impacts almost everyone, whether you are just writing a paper for a course and you're an undergrad, or you are a, fully tenured professor and department chair. So these are things that we all have to contend with. So if you have questions about authorship, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Donna put our webpage in the chat. Thanks, Donna. And I thank you all. We did record this, so if you want to send it to colleagues, students, anyone later on, if they're having trouble falling asleep, please do so. And thanks, everyone. Have a great Wednesday.